Hello, Future Tribe. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. On this week's episode, we've got Joe Clay. Joe, tell me a bit about yourself and what you do.
Hello, thank you for having me. I am many things. I run a company called Send and Shred, which is a recycling company, and I write books and I run a climate change project called The Carbon Diet. And at the moment, I'm running a campaign for the ACT Greens in the ACT election.
Wow, I did Google your name and kept seeing everywhere. I think you've written for Her Canberra, or you have a profile there. You were on the Canberra Innovation Network's website. You're just everywhere, which is awesome. Um, give us an idea of, if you don't mind me asking, how old you are and when you sort of got into all this. Was it sort of recently, or have you always been one of those people who had your finger in all sorts of different things?
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. I'm 43 years old. Look, I grew up in Canberra. I started out very conventionally, I guess. I finished a law degree and a creative arts degree, slightly unconventionally. And I started out my life in the public service, as many of us do in Canberra. And I worked in a few places, had some good jobs and some jobs that I didn't like so well. And I think as I went gradually through, I realized that I wanted to do something that would be really helpful for the environment, which is where I've moved further and further and further into sustainability, hence the climate change and the recycling sort of venture. And I also realized you learn a bit more about yourself, I think, as you get older and as you try more things. I realized that I actually really enjoy doing odd things out on my own, and taking little risks, and I actually get a bit stifled in structures. So I think that's probably why I'm quite a good fit for entrepreneurship, and art, and we'll see about politics. I don't know, but it's a lot of those, slightly unusual, slightly less structured things.
Yeah, so is this your first sort of go at politics?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'm an environmentalist, and I'm not a politician at all, but I've been in the climate change activist area. I go to the school strike for climate, and I've helped out with Stop Adani and a lot of those things. I've run a climate change project, and I'm really worried about climate change. I think, like every rational human being on the planet right now. And I think the more you see other people doing these amazing things, and I've seen people, get themselves arrested and make these amazing sacrifices for the sake of the planet and all of these things. You're like, well, what can I do? And what I could do was I could start a recycling company. And then when the opportunity came up with the Greens, I thought, yep, I could do that. That's something I don't know if I'll win, but I can give that a go.
You can give it a
And that
go.
will help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's, I think, two big things that we'll tackle during our conversation. One
Mm.
is definitely the politics side of things, and we'll get into that. And the other side is a bit more of what our listeners and what we're used to talking about, which is business and entrepreneurship and innovation and just doing sort of new things and taking risks and experimenting and all that. But before we roll into the two, give me an idea of sort of what responsibilities you have, sort of what things you have to balance out, because you're doing all these things, but then, as I like to say always on the podcast, there's the realities of life, realities of having to earn an income, realities of having a family or responsibilities. How's that? Like, give us an idea of where that's at before we roll into the two things, so that we understand how many things you have to juggle.
Yeah, look, I think that's real. I do quite a lot of different things. I pick things up quite quickly, but I actually don't. I'm not a work 100 hours a week kind of person.
Hmm.
I burn out. And there are some entrepreneurs who are. There's a bit of a myth in the entrepreneur sort of circle of, the success means, you give yourself 3 heart attacks and you mortgage the house and you go bankrupt, and that's great for the people who are that committed. I actually don't feel like that's me at all.
Hmm.
So I think coming into it at the age of 43, I've had some time to earn a salary. I have a partner who earns a salary, which means that relieves some pressure. And I always recommend that's a great idea for anyone running ventures. I know a lot of politicians and artists who do it that way. One person
Hmm.
has a very unreliable source of income and the other one has a fixed one. It's actually a
Yes.
good if you can make it so, that's
If you
great.
can swing it, that's
Yeah,
definitely a good thing to
yeah,
have, isn't it? It's just to
yeah, it
have
is.
some level of stability so that at least 50% of the partnership is stable, and you then, I think that unlocks a certain level of, especially you mentioned sort of you've had time to earn a salary and build up some sort of savings maybe. It gives you a confident base to operate out of versus either, like you mentioned, working yourself to the bone that you're giving yourself heart attacks or mortgaging
Mhm.
everything and trying to sort of just survive on nothing to make your dreams work, or doing the other route, which is just trying to find an external investment to just but then that's a whole different world where, to me, you come across as someone who's doing things out of passion, as much as out of sort of trying to make a change in the world and all those things. So um, for you, I'm sure it's just much better to be able to make the decisions yourself rather than, say, have investors sort of breathing it down your neck asking for a return on their investment.
Yeah. Yeah, look, and it is, and we did, for the recycling company, we did get investors, but we sort of went with a small pool, and we have people who are very clear about what the outcomes are going to be. And I've spoken to a lot of CEOs and entrepreneurs where if you, you get the monies in, and the monies is always great, but there are a lot of expectations that go with that capital funding. So you do have to be a little bit careful, I think. I think too, I have a daughter, I have a 6-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not dream of taking on a political campaign any earlier than when she was at school. And I love and admire the women who have babies and who manage that, but I would not have been able to. So I think it would have, yeah, a baby and a business and a stint at politics would have been one thing too many for me.
Would have been too crazy. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when did you start the business? Is it called Shred and Save? Is that right?
Yeah, send and
Yeah.
shred. Yeah, send
Oh,
and
yeah.
shred.
Send and Shred.
Yes,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. It's a recycling company. We Graham, my business partner Graham, who I used to work with in waste and recycling in government, he actually came up with the idea. And look, he came up with the idea about 5 years ago. It's a really good idea. We've found there are a lot of these problem waste streams, and a lot of companies are popping up to deal with that problem waste stream. So there's ManRags that does clothes, there's Mobile Muster that does phones. We do documents for the Home Office. So there's a lot of individual sort of problems. He came up with this business model, and look, we kicked it around for a couple of years. We then took it to the Green Shed, and then we formed a company in 2018, and we formed the company in 2017. We launched the product in 2018. So we've just had our second year of operating that company. I think we are past the startup phase, and we're up to that next little difficult prepubescent era.
Yeah, sort of
Yeah.
the troubled teenage stages of
The trouble, yes,
sort of, yeah.
Yeah, so we're in that scaling up. So we're fairly well established in Canberra, and our business model is a national business model. So we are scaling up and starting to find our e-commerce national marketing presence and scaling up our customer base. But we're not sort of quite there yet. Realistically, I remember Tiny at the Green Shed. He's run a lot of businesses. He's very entrepreneurial in Canberra. There's a good entrepreneur for you to speak to. But he said to me early in the piece that 3 to 5 years, and I think that's probably realistic. And I think it's actually good for pacing to have an idea of where the finish line is.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what you guys do through Send and Shred.
I would love to. So what we noticed is when people print paper in the office, in the workplace, they usually put it in a secure locked blue bin, and then a company comes and takes that locked bin away and shreds the paper, and it gets recycled. So that works brilliantly at work. People don't have that at home. So people were using home shredders to protect their sensitive information and guard against identity theft. And that's fine so far as it goes, but they're a bit fiddly to use, and the shredded paper doesn't get recycled. So if you put a whole piece of paper in your yellow topped bin, it gets recycled. If you shred it first, the council recycling facilities can't actually process it. It gets tangled up and it blows around.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's shredded paper, even at work, we haven't emptied the shredder for a little while, but when we do, we would normally empty it into the recycle bin, but we're not actually doing necessarily the right thing?
It might be, so in the workplace, you'd need to check because you have a different, it depends on who your
Yes.
commercial recycler is. At home, and this is the same problem all around Australia, they're all different council facilities, but they all have the same problem. They're all built to deal with big pieces of paper, and that's what they were designed
Hmm.
for, envelopes
Hmm.
and pages and, quite large
A4
pieces.
sheets of paper, yeah,
Absolutely,
like
yeah,
the kind of thing that you hold up to someone and they say that's a sheet of paper,
yeah.
not the kind of thing that you hold up to someone and they say that's a shredded sheet of paper. Hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. So
Hmm.
that's and we knew that when we were Graham and I were working in government together, and it was a perennial problem of what about the shredded paper? It actually causes a lot of trouble and it ends up in landfill. So he came up with this business model and we worked it up together. We've patented it actually. It's we've put a bit of IP into it. We send out post out through Australia Post a plastic bag. You fill it up with whole pages. You lodge it in the post office. You track it back, and we've got a little ping on our website that helps you track it back. It goes to a secure recycling factory. We shred and recycle it there, and then we give you a certificate of destruction. So we've basically taken that commercial service that was working quite well in the workplace, and we've come up with a home office version of that.
Okay. And now I have two questions that come to mind.
Yeah,
The
God.
first one is, how do you monetize this? What's the commercial viability around this? And as a second part, how do you ensure that this doesn't get intercepted in between, your home and the recycling facility?
Sure. I'll take the first. I'll take the second question first. It's a bit easier. It's a pretty secure chain. So Ozpost is, excuse me, Ozpost is fairly secure. So the same chain that sent you that secure document in the first place, that letter or that bank statement or that passport, is then processing it on that secure chain. It's tracked, so you can actually see where it is, and we give you a destruction certificate. And then at the end of the Ozpost delivery, it gets collected by a uniformed, security vetted Shred-X staff member, and taken to a secure facility that is locked, CCTV monitored, police cleared staff. And it meets the same requirements that government agencies and ASIO
Right.
agencies use. So it's actually the chain is quite secure, and we
Secure,
haven't had any
yeah.
problems. Yeah,
And
that
well, I
actually
mean, you make a good point of, well, Jermaine, the same way you received that thing, just reverse it, which is such a good, good point, because
yeah,
I didn't think about it that way. But yeah, if it's safe enough for, your bank to send you your credit card and personal details in the mail, then why isn't it safe for the same thing to happen the other way around?
reverse it. It's interesting though that it actually was before we had launched the business. That was one of the biggest risks we had. My insurance premium dropped 75% after the first year, because the first time anybody hears about this, they're like, oh my God, this is very risky. And then once you run for a year or two, now we're up to 2, you're like, yeah, it actually is fine. It's really fine.
Yeah.
And look, in a lot of ways, it's actually even safer. Mostly if something does go missing in the mail, it's almost always because it's been misaddressed, and ours
Hmm.
is all pre-printed addressing. So it's, yeah,
Hard
so
to
that
do.
it's a really valid question, but it hasn't actually turned out to be a problem. The first question is the more interesting one. So recycling is tricky. We running this business, we're coming into it as recyclers and environmentalists, and I think that's where most of the people running these recycling ventures come from. It does work commercially, but the margins are very tight because Australians don't really want to pay for their recycling. So we charge $24.95 for a bag, and our customers will pay that. But I think if you're a ruthless sort of business entrepreneur, you would want to be making much bigger profit margins. I think it probably just wouldn't be that appealing. And most of the people running these schemes like Mobile Muster or Manrakes, they're either kind-hearted recyclers or there's a whole lot of industry backing behind them. It does work, but they're quite
Yeah, but you're
marginal.
sort of always sort of teetering on, sort of small thing goes wrong, you're sort of posting a loss. If everything goes right, you're posting a profit, but you're not talking sort of multi-million dollar profits or losses either way. It's just a very neutral sort of business to run, because you make a good point of, you have to balance it out, because you might be environmentally thoughtful or conscious, but you
Mm,
also don't want to pay too much of a premium for that. So
mm,
you can't, as a business, charge too much because you're then not achieving what's almost a social enterprise, or an environmental enterprise. So you've got to balance it out because you want enough adoption, because then your overall business is more sound and more commercially viable. But yeah,
yeah,
it's a
spot
fine
on.
balance.
Yes, but yeah, absolutely spot on. So it does work, but it's I suspect anybody who's going to start a recycling venture probably won't have money as their primary motivation. And I would love to be proven wrong. I really hope so. I shouldn't say that actually. Some of the recycling ventures, so the Green Shed is a really good business that hires 75 staff and, makes money. So some of them do quite well, but generally speaking, recycling is quite an expensive industry to work in.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Now, especially I guess when you're trying to recycle something like paper that has inherently not a lot of value, then say, we have clients who work in the technology recycling space, and I know there's a lot more money there, because there's inherently more gold, more valuable
Metals.
minerals and
Yeah.
materials within those things, where paper's a sheet, it's a sheet of paper. No matter how much you break it down, it's sort of at its very simple form. It's not, it's more a commodity than a valuable sort of thing that gold, for example, like people trade with gold. You wouldn't necessarily trade with paper nowadays, at least.
Yeah,
um
no, that's absolutely right. It's interesting too in Australia. We've, since the China waste ban, a lot of these markets have been disrupted. And I'm always in two minds about how much government should have to pay for and do all our recycling and where the role is for the private businesses. And it's obviously, there's a balance. There's obviously a balance there, but I think it's a constantly shifting balance. I think you've got to keep re-looking at it and saying, what are our goals as a society? If we want a circular economy, which bits do we support? Which bits do we pay for? How is it going to work?
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And it takes some, possibly some generational sort of new generations coming through with different core beliefs, perhaps, and different focuses there as well. Now, tell me a little bit about when you guys started, how you got the message out there. Did you like what did it look like? What did you do? What was the, was there a lot of branding, logo design, web design involved, or was it more of a simplistic beginning? How did you get the word out? Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, I'd love to. We did it all wrong. Everybody, probably everybody tells you that. We did everything wrong the first time around. We originally started, we wanted to be a bricks and mortar business. So we,
Right.
yeah, yes, and we are not, yes. So we originally thought that we would be selling in shops, and we put a lot of effort into getting our product placed in shops. Now, I cannot tell you in 2020 how delighted I am that that failed and we are an e-commerce business only. That is just marvelous, just marvelous. So we started out with a very basic, not particularly well built website, not particularly well designed, that cost a lot because it was custom built, which is not the way I would recommend anybody do it. We put a lot of effort into our product design. We got that done. We did that well.
Mhm.
It turned out to be weirdly difficult to design a plastic bag, but we managed. We had a couple of goes. The first batch we got back from the factory broke, and then we had to go back to first principles, start all over again, push our launch back, find a new factory. We actually physically toured factories in Shenzhen and found a factory that actually designs police evidence bags and bank
Mhm.
coin bags and those high security bags, because we just accidentally picked somebody who said they could do the job, but they were basically giving us weak, flimsy courier bags. It wasn't good enough.
Because you've got
So I
to sort
think,
of hit a fine balance there again, don't you? Where you don't want the bags to be too good for what you're trying to achieve, because that introduces weight, and then
and
on
cost,
on a
yeah.
large scale, that's a lot of minimization of material that you can transport. But then you can't have it to be too flimsy, because you have this responsibility to make sure it's a robust sort of bag that can make it through the trip there and back.
Yeah, absolutely. It was good. We ended up talking to the product designers in Ozpost, who we probably hadn't gotten the right information the first time around. And then I spoke to this lovely bloke, Tony, who told me about the kitchen table test. I'm not sure if he wants me to reveal the kitchen table test, but I'm about to.
Yep.
The kitchen table test, it's an Australia Post, very scientifically designed test in which you pick up your product and fling it down on the ground 10 times over the kitchen table. And if it doesn't break, that's a good
You're good to
product.
go. Nice.
Yeah. So
Well, sometimes it's those simple tests, right? That you, I think, because there's very much the other side of things where people overthink it and then you miss the whole point. So this is just a classic. Let's just do what we want this bag to withstand. So I love it.
Yeah, it was good. So we put a lot of effort into trying to get into bricks and mortar shops and didn't succeed for various
Like
reasons.
newsagents and supermarkets, or
we did a tiny little effort in newsagents and supermarkets. We thought we'd be a really good fit for Australia Post shops because when you lodge, you would pick up another one. And look, that may be something that happens still one day. It's something that we're still working on. And we tried some of the big stationers, and rather flatteringly, one of them, I won't name it, said that we were too much of a competitor for their fellow shredders. I'm like, yes,
wow,
I think
nice.
we're a threat. That's awesome. So we didn't sort of place it there. And by this stage, of course, we'd launched and we were selling online. And we're like, well, the overheads are quite good, the fixed costs are quite low, maybe we should just do this. And at that point, I had a really good look at what we had and realised that we were not really doing e-commerce because we found ourselves accidentally in e-commerce. So we went back and did proper e-commerce.
Nice.
And sort of fixed it up a bit.
It's that knowing when to pivot, knowing when to change, knowing when to not necessarily call it quits, but just change the direction that you were running in. Sometimes that makes all the difference, I would say. So no, that makes total sense. So where was I going to go? So you guys sort of started that, but then when you relaunched, what did you do different the second time around, apart from going e-commerce?
We got a grant. We did the
Oh,
first batch all on private funding.
right.
We didn't get a very big grant. You don't need much for e-commerce. E-commerce actually really appeals to me. If I do another venture, I will just do e-commerce because I'm sort of a high risk person. I quite like to give things a go, but I'm also a low risk person. I don't want to have heart attacks and mortgage my house. So e-commerce is sort of this nice little thing in between where you don't need to, sell your firstborn. You can actually set things up and see what happens. So we managed to get an Innovation Connect grant, which is marvelous, and we for the specific purpose of updating our e-commerce. So I then went back and redid our website, and I did it myself, which is, oh my goodness, so much easier than instructing someone else to do it. And we have a marvelous e-commerce website that has all the actual genuine e-commerce features that you need of, voucher sales and automated email marketing and abandoned cart alerts and all of that very, very standard streamlined tools that the second you get them optimized, you suddenly realize, oh goodness, this is why people like e-commerce.
Yeah, because I mean, you make a good point there. Once you get it optimized, once you understand that there's sort of these levers that you just increase and decrease as you need until you get this perfectly balanced sort of system, you then can you can decide, when you need to turn things up, when you need to decrease things. When I know some of the clients that we work with, they know, it's very predictable that they know, this date, this time, they've got to send this email with this offer to increase sales, or when sales are too much, this is how they can not decrease them, but sort of control how much is coming through. And that's the beauty with e-commerce, that you could possibly do it with brick and mortar, but you can't control the inflow of traffic in the same way that you can with e-commerce.
Yeah, look, I bricks and mortar, and I haven't cracked that. Obviously, other people have. It's very expensive to advertise a bricks and mortar product and a new bricks and mortar venture. And we were doomed from the start on that, to be perfectly frank. The only entrepreneurs I have met who have really succeeded using traditional advertising methods are not selling $25 widgets. They are selling, you know, great big software packages or something a bit bigger. So we experimented with a lot of traditional advertising, and it's just so expensive. It would be impossible to convert enough to make up the costs.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. It's you would hit that, I guess, point of needing so much like mass market appeal, that in the first few years it would just be silly to think that you're going to hit that unless you're willing to invest so much money. And then by that point, all you're doing is speeding up a process that would have eventually happened anyway.
Yeah.
Is the way I see it. You know, it's sort of the, you know, do you want to be the McDonald's or the Hilton, where it's either cheap but mass market and so many stores in every corner, or the Hilton where, you know, very few of us would be eating there, but we'd pay a pretty penny to do so. And both result in you know, good margins, but for very different reasons. So yeah, love that. It's a really interesting concept. How do you sort of manage the eco-friendly side of things? I assume the plastic bags themselves are recyclable.
Yes, they are. Yeah. So we actually, because we're recyclers, we sort of sorted out our chain and set up our service arrangements probably first before we've done anything else. So the paper gets shredded and sent to an Australian pulp mill and gets turned back into paper. And our paper, we call it high quality office whites. It's mostly very high quality office paper that is going into those bags, and it stays quite high up the chain, and most of it then gets turned back into reflex office paper. So that's easy. The plastic bags is, oh, I love talking recycling. You'll have to hose me down. The plastic bags are, yeah. So there's a newish business model, Plastic Forests in Albury. They're a soft plastic recycling company. So they actually take the red cycle soft plastics from Coles. So you know how you can drop off your soft plastics and your gone plastic? Yeah. So they're the end factory that processes those, and they turn it back into pelletized plastic and these little garden edging plastic products that they sell in Bunnings. So it's a circular plastic. And it actually, interestingly, because we were in a plastic bag product, that itself has been a bit of a marketing problem. So our first few product designs, we were absolutely dead set. We wanted to have this thing in a box or in a tough bag paper satchel because we liked it better and we thought it would appeal to our customers more. And we still have customers that say, oh, I'm not touching plastic, like, but it gets recycled. It's circular plastic.
It can be recycled. Yeah.
Well, ours is. You're right.
Yes.
Not all plastic is recycled. Ours is, because we send it it comes to our factory and we send it to Albury. So ours is.
I just wanted to clarify that, just because, you know, it's the same question that I had was, you know, okay, and you hear all this. I to be honest, I've never done the research around it, but you know, things like, okay, biodegradable plastics are good, but you know, they take 100 years to break down, and they're still, you know, end up in landfill, and all like there's all this, I think, almost mystique around it, because I think there's certain commercial interests, or companies that have commercial interests to educate us, not miseducate us, but not quite educate us as much as they need to. And then there's labels like biodegradable that I think the common or the general person thinks is one thing, but in reality, it isn't quite that same thing. So it's I think important to clarify, just that when someone hears this interview, they can understand that, yes, you know, this product is set up in such a way, and it sounds to me like it's more the right decision of materials, but also the supply chain and how things end up where they need to end up, than necessarily, you know, it's not like a proprietary, you know, material that you guys invented that is some special plastic. It's just that it ends up in the right place so that people know what to do with it.
Yeah, look, it's a really good point to clarify. There is a lot of confusion about plastics. There's been a lot of, I don't want to say intentional mislabeling, but I agree with you. The ACCC has looked at the manufacturers of bioplastics and compostable, degradable. It is very difficult to know. For communications, we realised the best thing to do was to tell people specifically what we're doing and where it goes. And once they know that, they relax a little, because we can say, here's where it goes, here's our chain, and here's a picture of what it turns into at the end, and here's the guy that you can verify with the third party if you're really that interested, and every now and then somebody will. I think this is where I guess I put on my greens hat and my climate change hat. We really need to start thinking about this when we do design products, and this is the challenge for governments, I think, and politicians and society as a whole. We can't just design something, anything, and not think about where it's come from and where it goes. That's what a circular economy is. Yeah, so you actually have to, when you, like we did it accidentally, I guess, because we are recyclers and we set up a recycling service. So we did set up the full chain, but we actually need to do that with everything. We need to think about, you know, when I sell this to somebody, if they use it for a day or a decade, what happens to it at the end of that life, and has anyone set up a chain for that?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, this is a nice segue into what you do sort of on the more political side, but quickly touching the climate change and the green sort of side of things. I wouldn't call myself sort of a crazy climate change guy, like, you know, sort of preaching to everyone about all these things and, you know, cycling around and so on and so forth. But at the very least, what I try and do personally, and I think this is something that is very easy to do for the average person, is just think about, you know, when you purchase something for, and this happens a lot in products, and it's commercially driven because people are price sensitive. So they might buy a really cheap thing and be only able to use it for 3 months because it'll deteriorate. You know, where I can, I would make the decision to buy something, you know, made of a better material or a stronger material because it will last for 2 years, even if it costs more money. Because that in my head at least is better than buying 4 new things every year or 8 things for the equivalent life cycle of one other thing. And then thinking about, like you said, where things come from, who's you know, making these things that they can be sold for so cheap. Like, you know, some products, I just look at them and I just think to myself, like, there has to be what is more or less slavery involved to create these things that we then use, admire, pay companies massive amounts of money for them to make huge margins on. And it's just about sort of being a bit more thoughtful. And I think in this day and age, like, we have so much information out there. Yes, there's also misinformation, but what's stopping you from Googling, you know, almost anything and looking into it?
Yeah, it's absolutely right. I think the problem is now too much information, which is exactly why I started my carbon diet project.
I saw that come up as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but look, I think the general guidance of get something that lasts for a long time is really good. I've been looking at carbon accounting and different aspects of the carbon footprint for a long time, and recycling, and I've got hundreds of thousands of words on the topic. But it all boils down, there are 2 principles and they work in every situation that I've found so far, and that's use less, choose greener, in that order. So first of all, if you can use less of it, you do. And then second of all, you pick whatever is the greener source. And maybe for recycling, that means, you know, it's made from recycled and then can be recycled for, you know, different fields. It's lower energy, lower emissions, whatever. But you can always do that with your purchasing.
Yeah, that's such a good thought process for, and like you say, I can't think of an instance where it wouldn't apply. Of just ask yourself, do I even need this thing first? And then if you do, what's the best decision that I can make based on the information that I have and what's available to me? So that's a nice sort of little two-prong test for everyone to do if you're listening and want to be a little bit more conscious without necessarily going to an extreme about it all. Let's talk about the political side of things. Now, how does someone find themselves and you know, to be honest, I'm not completely across politics. I think it's sort of an intentional thing that I just sort of go information overload. There's a lot more stuff in business that I'm interested in, but first give me an idea of what you're running for and what that means in sort of the political system.
Sure thing. So I am running for the seat of Ginninderra, which is the Belconnen district in Canberra, and I'm running for a seat in the ACT Legislative Assembly. And in the ACT, it's a combined state and local council system. So we don't have a state and a council. We perform both roles. There are 25 seats in the Legislative Assembly. The Greens, who I'm running for, currently hold 2 of those 25 seats, and they hold the balance of power. So they are quite influential. And despite the fact that they only have 2 seats, they've got 100% renewable electricity into the Canberra grid. And we've declared a state of climate change emergency and done a few quite interesting things like that. So that's the stakes, I suppose.
And so, how did you find yourself in this position to sort of, like running for some sort of position in government?
It's a weird thing. I don't know if you've ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, my English teachers are gonna wince a little bit. I think we're supposed to like study it, read it, watch it, but no.
Right. So in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there is this distant planet where the people are ruled by lizards and the lizards rule the people. And the people hate the lizards and the lizards hate the people. And every election, the people show up and vote for a lizard. And people say, well, why did you vote for lizard? Because otherwise the wrong lizard would get in. So I think which I think is probably what I think of politics too, frankly. I think this is probably what the average person thinks of politics. Look, I'm not sort of a politician by nature. I've actually only been a member of the Greens party itself for a year and a half. I'm quite new to that party process. I never really had a view that I would run. I'm not somebody who's decided they would have a career in politics. The reason I am doing it is because we needed some candidates in Ginninderra. There was somebody had a few words to me and there was an opportunity there. And I sort of looked around and I thought, yeah, there's all this stuff going on with climate change. I can see I'm a member of the ACT Greens. I can see that they have genuinely achieved real climate action on an ACT scale and they can take it up to the national level. I can genuinely see that if we can do that, we can get e-cars, we can get off gas, we can do all the next bits of technology that, I see happening in Europe and all these other countries. We could do it here, but we need to have the voices in there to do it. So it's, there you go, the accidental politician, the accidental lizard. You can call me the accidental lizard.
That's such a... it's the first time I've heard someone sort of explain it in that way that it makes sense, right? It's almost like it's the system. So you're not going to fundamentally change it so that what happens won't happen anymore. So the next best thing is, it's almost like if you can't beat them, join them, and then hope for change from within. Like join the team or join the group of bullies, but then slowly convert every single one so they're no longer. And I'm not calling politicians bullies, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying it's just another way of thinking about it, right? They're just sort of a group of people.
It is a group of, and I think it's quite common for the Greens too. So a lot of the Greens politicians were activists. So Shane Roddenberry, who's our current ACT party leader, he used to run one of the Green lobby groups. Caroline Lakuta has been an activist for a long time. So it's actually, I think it would be very unusual in the other parties. I don't know that, I haven't come across anybody who's come from that background, but for the Greens, often there's a bunch of activists who are worried about a certain issue, certain topic, often the environment, and you work on that for a long time. And then if you see an opportunity to work on the inside, you're like, well, I'll pop over here. You guys keep up the good work over there. Keep chucking stuff at us, and we'll see how we go.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'll tell you that. Like I want, personally, I think my sort of goal is to have as much of an impact in just general sort of the community and give back as much as I can. And sometimes I do think, maybe politics is the way to go. And then I always think, well, you look at sort of what's happening nowadays, and I think instead what another option is, just business in general has so much power. And our business, we do marketing, we do advertising, so we're almost in a privileged position to be able to get a certain message across and do it without having to necessarily pay a third party as much as someone else with the lack of that expertise has to do. So I've had this chat with a lot of other people who've sort of mentioned, oh, my brother's thinking of running for this, and my sister's running for that, and so on and so forth. And we always come back to, well, if you can swing it, and it's harder as an individual. I think as an individual, you're best to do sort of this, a similar thing to what you're doing, sort of joining in on the system. But then, I guess I come back to, let's try and build a business that has enough. If we think about it, a lot of social causes, unfortunately, the big businesses don't like to push social causes. They just like to bandwagon when it's, I think, commercially beneficial for them, like all these different movements. But I just don't see why businesses couldn't just, sort of push that themselves, rather than saying, you need to buy our latest shiny gadget.
Yeah.
Why can't they make intentional decisions? I think the answer is because of money and just the general capitalism. But
General capitalism is a permanent tension. And I will say that I think our business growth with Send and Shred is probably slower than it would be if you didn't put a socialist in as your chief marketing officer. I come from the set point of nobody should buy anything ever. Oh, but here's this thing that you should buy, which is not how most CEOs would be running it. But I actually think now, I think there is a really growing consciousness of ethical business. And I think starting or joining an ethical business is a very powerful way to make a massive difference that often you can implement much faster than any government agency can. And I look at medium-sized businesses like the Green Shed in Canberra, which does an awful lot of good, and they're a huge network of junk empire businesses, but they've given over $1 million to charity as well in cash. So they do a lot of social good as well. And then I look at a lot of they're probably not that new now, but the newer business models like Australian Ethical and Future Super and a lot of these divestment companies. There's a huge range of socially and environmentally aware businesses. Anybody who has a conscience and wants to be a business person, I think it is a really good time to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and it's, I think it's just the general societal sort of consciousness is at a level where, at least it's slowly increasing the number of people who think in that way. It's more about, I would hope, what's happening to society as a whole, what's happening to the environment, what's happening to everything, rather than what's happening to me. What can I have more of? What's going to be better for me, per se?
Yeah, look, I think that's true too. So a lot of these things are small shares, but all of the models that I've come across in my various ventures, you look at things like the new plant foods, and it's a tiny proportion of the population eating a plant foods only diet, 1 or 2%. But the market share on the supermarket fake meats is doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And electric vehicles are the same, and the divestment is the same. So all of these things are very, very small, but they're the ones that are quickly growing, particularly in 2020. I run a number of share portfolios, and the ethical share portfolios are performing extremely well, and the conventional ones are not. So
Exactly.
I think we may be at this little bit of a turning point where collectively we're starting to say, yeah, that's not really a good way of doing things anymore.
Exactly. And, all majorities at one point were a minority. So I guess it's only a matter of time, right? I mean, even iPhones and Apple these days, it's so humongous that you wouldn't think that, in the late 90s, Apple was a bit of a joke. It was, Apple's who? It's all Microsoft and this and that. So,
oh my God, that's so recently too. I
exactly.
remember the late 90s.
I mean, in the late 90s, right? Like, to have an Apple or to have a Mac product would have been such a hipster sort of, you're so different sort of thing to do. Where nowadays, that's what, the average person, if someone said I have an iPhone, it wouldn't be very surprising. So that I guess that's just me saying that, these things they're small movements for the moment, but to me it does look like, and business as well, it just looks like people are being more conscious about things, and the big behemoths, I think, will realize that it's commercially better for them to be sustainable. And, is that the worst outcome? Not really. Like if it's commercial, commercial reasons that push someone to be more green, well, that's okay for now. We'll just, hopefully that'll inspire the next generation to be actually green for ethical purposes rather than commercial purposes.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've given up trying to win people's hearts or souls. I don't really care. I'm happy to just win their outcomes. And particularly in renewable electricity, I think that's what we saw very clearly. So the climate change people and the environmentalists like me pretty much talked about it the wrong way for 30 years. And then when the solar panel industry started taking off, they didn't even bother talking about the environment. They just talked about saving money. And that turned out to be very effective. And I'm like, right, so we'll just do that then. So I think so long as, however you get there in the end, it's all right.
And that's what I come back to as well. As long as the overall, the net benefit is positive, obviously you try and do things, you would do things ethically, but as long as the outcomes are positive in the end, that's at least a more of a win than not having that outcome at all. Just before we wrap up, tell me a little bit more about like what you hope to do moving forward and where we can find out a bit more about you.
Google Joe Clay. Apparently you'll get a lot of hits on very many different random things. Look, I've got my website, The Carbon Diet, and that is the project I ran for a couple of years where I cut my footprint and that of the average Australian by 75%, running different 1-week experiments. I am hoping to turn that into a book. I've written a lot of articles and made some short films and done some artworks on that, but I'm hoping to turn that into a chatty book at some stage, because I started that project when I read books like this in other countries and there wasn't anything in Australia. So I'm hoping to turn that around. I'm obviously hoping to win a seat for the ACT Greens in the ACT election. And then I'm hoping to continue with Send and Shred and turn that into an Australian behemoth. I have 3 conflicting goals and I can't really tell you which one of those will pan out.
But it sounds, it sounds like you've got a lot on your plate and a lot of things to look forward to. And I think that alone is awesome. And, wish you the best on all those different frontiers. And I think by the sounds of it, no matter which one wins or which one sort of ends up taking over most of your life, those will be good outcomes regardless.
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome. Are you ready to go into the top 12?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I haven't prepped my top 12. We'll have to wing it.
That's all right. Let's just wing it. That's the whole point. Top 3 books or podcasts that you recommend. Are you a reader or a podcast listener?
I am a reader. My favorite book of all time is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's not new. Podcasts at the moment, I'm listening to CoronaCast because, that's very 2020. And I'm also really enjoying the Australia Institute series. They're doing a series on economics. They've done a lot of really good sessions on the gas industry and electric vehicles. So I'm working my way through there. So that'll be my top 3, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. Next one, top 3 software tools you can't live without.
Love this. My website for Send and Shred is with Shopify, and I adore Shopify in every way. My website for Carbon Diet is Strikingly, and I adore them. They just give the most marvelous custom support, and they're just so drop and drag. It's all got to be drop and drag. And I also use Canva Pro, which again is drop and drag design, and it is fantastic.
Yeah, love it. It sounds like, you just rattled those off really, really quickly. So it's clear that you use them all the time. Any mantras, top 3 mantras that you try and live by, or sayings that you try and live by?
Oh, I'm actually not much of a self-help person, so this is going to be a bit harder. Let's start with the 2 I've come up with in the environment. Use less, choose greener. That's 2 mantras for you. Can we count that as 2?
Yeah.
What's my next mantra? I don't know. I don't have a mantra. I do make sure I do something that I like every day.
Hey, I think that's as good as anything to live by. So Just do something that you like every day. I think people sometimes get lost in doing stuff for other people, or just doing stuff because everyone else is doing it, even if it's going to work. And I think it's nice to be able to just do something good and something that you like once a day, even if it's for me it's often having a sugary drink or something, but it's just nice. So I love that. Top 3 people you follow or study, and why?
Oh, this is tougher. Oh goodness, I'm going to embarrass him. I'm going to mention Tiny from the Green Shed,
Mm-hmm.
Tiny Street. Because we put our business together, sort of they incubated us, the Green Shed incubated us, and I spent a lot of time around Tiny, and he's an absolute dynamo inspiration of 6 billion ideas, and 9 billion of them will come out. It's just, he's just this great energizing person to be around, and he's landed a lot of really interesting business models.
Mm-hmm.
So I will definitely name him. 3 more people or accounts to follow. This is terrible. I'm obviously not getting enough sources from people. I'm gonna claim the Greens en
Mm-hmm.
masse. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to start naming individuals. There's a bunch of very smart academics, business people, and environmentalists who are just doing all these amazing things in the Greens. And you can jump in there and get whatever answer you need on anything like this. And I'm going to claim the school strikers. There you go. There's my inspiration. The school strikers. Oh, they're amazing. Children's are organising mass public events, nailing media, on message. They know what they want. They know exactly what the big problems in the world are. They know exactly how to fix it. And honestly, all I need to do is keep a few seats warm in the assembly until they all turn
Until they're
19
old enough.
and
Yep.
take over. Yeah, so the school strikers en masse.
Love it. What an eclectic bunch of people to follow and study. Just a few from all over the place. But I love it. I never knew that Tiny's Green Shed was named after a person named Tiny. There you go. We might have to
He's
get him
not
on the
tiny.
podcast.
There's nothing about that man that's tiny.
Sounds like a really interesting person to talk to.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that sort of wrapped things up. And thank you for your time today, Joe.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a blast.
Yeah, likewise. Lovely to chat.